Uh, Welcome back to another episode of Jamin's Daily. We have on our podcast today, once again, I think maybe for the fourth or fifth time now, he is a regular, one of my favorites, Martin Pina. Martin Pina. How you
I
doing?
love it, man. I'm doing great. How you doing, man?
We're doing good. We're gonna shoot this in the split screen so that the folks at home can see both our sexy mugs the entire time. Okay, because we
All right.
need recognition for our amateur boxing event that is gonna happen at some point. I had a Super Bowl party, and it came up somehow, and I had some haters, some doubters, and I was like, ooh, talk about just the fuel for the flank for my desire. It just went up. I was like, doubt me, please. Keep this, bring it.
You know, do a little bit of the same, right? Um, you're old, you're fat, which are, they're not inaccurate points, but I can't work on the age thing. I'm working on
No,
the fat part, and we're
true.
making progress. Maybe I'll throw
Yeah.
up only twice during the fight.
Have you had when you talk to any friends, or maybe you've been keeping this closer to the chest than I have, but I tell anybody and everybody that, listen, I'm going to be in a boxing match for charity. We're going to make the goal is to make $10,000, and I pick my opponents wisely. So I'm gonna. What's your face? Let's be Facebook friends. I'm gonna send you the link. And I normally get thumbs up, hell of a job, but then you get some haters, even in your own family. So I want to know, Martin Pena. Do you know? Have you had anybody has said or has told you, been maybe, perhaps, well, maybe that's not a good idea, or perhaps yada yada. Anybody yet? I want to know. We're gonna call them out right now.
And I unfortunately cannot call this or say that I'm going to call this man out because he brought me into this world and he could take me out of it.
Yeah.
My
The
old
old
man's the only
man,
one. Yeah, he's like, you're an
no.
idiot. It's like, well.
But you can't. The old man gets a pass, dog. That's how it works. The old man
Yeah,
gets a pass. I guess the people who love you the most are like, don't want to see you do it.
except for my
I was,
wife. She's like, oh hell yeah, let's do this. I'm like, oh
yeah,
shit.
yeah. Well, that's why I've never met your wife. I've seen like 4 photos on Facebook, but knowing that, she sounds cool to me. So that's
Yeah,
great.
super cool, man. Super cool.
Well, let's get into a couple of things. Did you watch? I had, Andy Ruiz.
Hmm.
He's in our chat. He's in our
Tight knit group of buddies.
yeah, super secret society, and I I sent who I thought was his brother Fred. Okay, because he has a brother named Fred, but it was his dad on Facebook. Okay, so I've been sending him some links to my podcast. So recently, he commented on the podcast that I put out with me and Daniel, this most recent one. And this guy and Mr. Ruiz is like, "This is Andy's dad." I was like, "Oh crap!" They all look the same to me. Andy, Fred, they all look the same. Okay, and Hewitt, there's like 5 men in that family. They all look the same. Good looking. You're all good looking men, but he's like opining on the podcast, saying he's actually listened to it and he likes what we're doing, and he's a big conservative too, so he's like on board. And because in that podcast we were kind of in Daniel, who's more, a classic liberal, is talking, having some criticism on Biden, and so Mr. Ruiz comes in and is like, why don't you just call Biden an idiot? You know, but bro, that was some of the most in-depth reaction that I've had on the podcast in a while, which is fun, which is why you do it. So I can only imagine if you were really a popular creator and you're getting all this stuff all the time. I gotta, I'm trying to get there. I just recently had 1,000, no, 100 hours of viewership on YouTube. So I hit a benchmark,
Oh,
man. So maybe
there you go.
you can
You
contribute.
haven't been doing it that long either. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I had my doubts. I didn't know that. I didn't think you would still be running the podcast this far down the road, and I am more than willing to admit that I was wrong about that. And here I am on the podcast.
For
The
the
doubter.
you were episode number 5. You should go back. Here's the thing, man. Your children are gonna see episode 5 of Jamin's Daily when we're like at episode 5,000. Okay, you're gonna be episode 5. Okay, and you're gonna show, and they'll be like, "Oh, Daddy,
Vintage.
look at you. You had no gray hair in your beard, Daddy. Look how young you are." It's gonna be like that, man. Because you watch some of the old Joe Rogans, and it looks like they're in the dark ages. So can you imagine?
Yeah,
It's hilarious.
like in somebody's room. Some
Someone's got
dirty laundry everywhere.
like what we're doing. Basically, what we're doing now, man. This is what they were doing. Now they
Yeah.
got the multiple cameras working. It's gonna happen. I still do it like this for convenience. If we could actually have a production and I did this for a living, there's no excuse for it not looking great.
Yeah.
But like on a whim, I think I was sitting on the toilet this morning and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna tell Martin we're gonna do a podcast and he's gonna it's a high likelihood of him saying yes.
You know it, man. You know it.
You
I
wrote,
have fun when we do this.
and I don't have my kids. My kids weren't gonna be here, so I had the whole night to myself. So thank you again for joining Jamin's Daily. This is gonna be episode 107.
Okay. All right.
107. So let's. The reason why I brought up Daniel in the podcast this Saturday, we did a UFC, but we also talked about Ukraine, which is
Oof.
still a very fluid situation. But days ago, we were being told on several media outlets that the Ukrainians had been told by the Russians themselves, perhaps, or they had at least intel that Russia was going to be invading on Wednesday. Wednesday, I mean, I guess it's still Wednesday, but
It's
it
probably
kind of,
Thursday over there now. I'm
it's
sure.
probably Thursday over there, right? Exactly. So I don't know. I didn't get any alerts about an invasion. What are your thoughts, my friend?
I think that there is a lot of they call it saber rattling going on.
Mm-hmm.
The Russians obviously. I mean, I think my feeling is that they have every intention of invading at some point or taking some sort of military action. But it's kind of the X factor is how involved is the U.S. going to get, right? Because they were talking about sanctions only from the beginning, right? No boots on the ground, crippling economic sanctions. But it's not sounding that way anymore, right? I mean, like I'm starting to get the impression that there's going to be some obligations that the U.S. has as part of NATO allies. I know Ukraine's not a part of NATO, but they've got a lot of other European countries that are saying that they aren't, they're not foreclosing the possibility of sending troops in there. And I mean, I don't know a whole lot about this type of stuff, but if I remember correctly, it's kind of what happened in like the previous kind of World War situations, right? Like people had agreements with other countries and
Mm.
pacts, and so as they start getting dragged in, I don't know if that's what we're looking at here, but it sort of feels,
That is a good point in terms of alliances and treaties and such that drag other member states or other member signatories to these treaties to have to get involved. One of the biggest one of the biggest sticking points is an alliance and membership in an alliance, which is NATO. In the Ukraine, after uh, they became independent, has been influenced more and more by the West. They're not a member of NATO, but they're some kind of like junior member, or they're trying to be. And so that is a red line for Putin. He
yeah,
will not allow Ukraine to be a member of an alliance that whose sole reason for creation is to confront and combat Russia. So the theory or the question is, then Daniel was critical of Biden when it was like, with Russian if Russia invades, what are the consequences? And so Biden made a quip in the saying World War III. Really, uh, I don't think Ukraine is worth World War III, but what can you do? And I do feel like this is not a coincidence in the sense that Russia and then China might have this wink and a nod about you go here. Imagine if Russia was to go invade Ukraine in the coming days. And while that is going on and everybody's focused and like what the heck is going on over here, boom, China invades Taiwan. What the heck? We're going to sanction both of these military powers. We're going to sanction China. China's going to be like, listen, we're on the side of Russia. You know, the foreign minister of Russia has said the sanctions mean nothing. We've been subject to sanctions for many years already. If anything, it's only strengthened our economy because we've found ways to work around it.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much of that is posturing. I think there's a lot of posturing going on from like all sides at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think oil would probably be a pretty big issue. There's like this massive pipeline that they're threatening to cut off, if Russia behaves
Gas,
poorly.
gas.
Gas, yeah, natural gas is what it is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I mean, and I have military buddies who told me like, dude, I wouldn't even consider worrying about, the possibility, this could lead us into a World War III sort of situation. So, I mean, the smarter people than me, people that are more in the know with these types of things have said that that's not something that's very likely. It's just such a weird thing that's going on there. Like, I mean, it's to me, I mean, it's just unsettling for no reason that's based in any sort of like, knowledge of the inner workings of this thing. Just the atmosphere is very bizarre. Like this buildup that's happening at the border of a country that my understanding is Russia considers to be part of their homeland, like territory concessions or territory losses following the Cold War. I mean, when you put yourself in their position, you think like, well, like if somebody came and took Texas, right, from the U.S., another a foreign country, a foreign adversary, 30, 40 years down the road, 50 years down the road, folks in the U.S. probably look at it still the same way. Like, hey, that's our land there that somebody took from us, and you feel like you have this right to it. I think that's probably what. I mean, aside from the concerns about being surrounded by Western allies or having some strategic NATO aligned country right on their doorstep, I think there's probably some drive behind it involving their view as to being the rightful or that the Ukraine is rightfully part of Russia based on historic.
Well, correct. No, you're correct. The thing is, this is uh, I guess actual what do you call scholars who follow this and who've written works. Who I do recall a book that I read years ago in which they said all wars going forward will be regional wars. You're not going to see major powers belligerent against each other because that means total destruction. Okay. We're talking about hypersonic missiles with nuclear warheads, okay, and things like this. I mean, it's just like they said, everything is going to be fought by proxy regionally. So in Ukraine, you're in certain areas, especially up in the border areas of Russia. So I think that's the like northeasterns and the eastern and northeastern part, the right side of Ukraine. Um, there are ethnic Russians who live there. There are people who are Russian who live in the Ukraine. They don't consider themselves to be Ukrainian. They consider themselves to be Russian. These are the separatists, things called Donbass. There's several areas within the Ukraine who have been fighting a separatist war for a while, in which Russia has been aiding them. But then you have the Ukrainians who are very nationalistic, who don't want to be Russian either. Like, we don't want to be Russia. We want our own country. Not only do we want our own country, because Belarus is its own freaking country, but Russia runs it. Okay,
Yeah,
Ukraine, Okay, Ukraine is like, okay, not only are we want to be our own country, but we don't want for you to call the shots.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, Putin says, "I'm not having it." Okay, so
I mean, that's how the Russians were so. I mean, able to. I mean, they took Crimea without firing a single shot. But I mean, people overlook the fact that there was a lot of folks in that area who were on board with that happening.
waving little Russian flags, I'm sure.
And so you have to really understand the sort of the dynamics in the history. And I admittedly don't know almost anything about that region. I know that it's just a very hardened group of people, like the all the different folks that live that I mean call that part of the world home. It's not a real hospitable place. A lot of the Baltic countries and or those countries that like they produce a lot of really high quality UFC fight or MMA fighters. The
Yes,
Dagestan, those
yes,
mountainous regions, real rugged people.
the Caucasus, they call it the
Yeah,
Caucasus.
yeah, and it's. I mean, these folks. I mean, it just seems like they're willing to fight and they're going to fight and it's going to be like there was clips of people in the Ukraine learning how to fire
Sure.
rifles. They were arming them with like old like AK-47s and showing them how to shoot. It's like, dude, these people are ready, man. Like, we talk about here in like places like Texas, right? Like you're gonna encounter gun owner after gun owner, right? But then you see that in action. Like they've got this old lady on the ground holding a Kalashnikov, right? She's ready to start squeezing out rounds. Whew, that is a whole different, you know.
And ultimately, I believe in 2022, what would actually defeat Ukraine, and this is where Donald Trump was right, which was very bizarre. Just energy policies in general. Okay, gas is up because when Biden came in, he killed the Keystone Pipeline, and he created a economic atmosphere that was combative to energy production, and so it's not a coincidence that energy prices go up. This is, if you want to save the planet and go green, this is the reality. Okay, that wasn't or isn't even still the more of the GOP mantra, right? It's like, we're gonna drain them all. Let's produce as much as we can, right? The thing is, because of that, one of that gas, that pipeline that we're talking about from Russia, that goes through the Ukraine, that goes through all of Europe, Germany, all these places, creates a what do you call it, like a dependency, because here we are creating an alliance to fight what is it militarily against Russia, but yet they could bring us to our knees by saying, you know what, we're going to cut off all this natural gas that all Germany, the Ukraine, all these people rely on. That will bring people. They cut it off in the winter, people will freeze to death. They don't have, like you said, they don't have to shoot a single shot. They can cut it off, and there'll be riots in these countries because gas prices, the price for these things will skyrocket. And so the whole thought was, why are we going to let this happen when we, the US, can export natural gas and other energy to these countries where you're gonna import? How does it make sense for Germany and Ukraine, all these countries, to import natural gas from Russia? Every dollar, because the prices in energy have gone up, we've basically financed this whole adventurism. It costs a lot of money to send hundreds of thousands of troops and the materiel to a border. Okay, we basically financed this whole situation because energy prices have gone up. We're only enriching Putin because of it. And
That
I,
may be a bit of a tenuous. I mean, I think there may be some things being overlooked there. I mean, uh, you
please,
know,
and please, opine, enlighten the folks that
there was
are.
just some. First, the whole concept of this is the price of the cost of going green. That's probably not accurate. In fact, my understanding is that at this point, the the sort of quote unquote green energy production is scalable, and it makes the argument 10 years ago, 15 years ago was like it's just not cost effective, right? Like fossil fuels, tried and true technology, this wind stuff, this the solar stuff is just not, you don't get enough bang for your buck. That's not true anymore. But we have to take into account this is not something that happens in the wild in terms of like, what causes energy prices to go up. Say like, well, it's these green energy policies that buy. No, dude, like there's been price fixing and market manipulation in energy production forever now. I mean, like these prices, there's a lot of people making a lot of money. It's not just Putin that's making, in Russia that's making money off this. We're sitting on massive stockpiles of crude, and like if we're looking at it in super basic terms, right? Like, and why are energy prices up for the average American? We're sitting on a ton of it because there's strategic decisions that are being made, and there's lobbies, right? Like energy lobbies, same way that there's clean energy lobbies, right? People have been wielding a lot of influence, and in a global economy, I think that there's a lot more factors.
The price of oil when we were producing more, like, the sheer fact that the fact of the matter is this, and you have to look at empirical evidence. You can just look at the years. Take out who was the administration. Just look at production and then prices. Okay, supply and demand. Okay, currently you can Google. I mean, recently the current administration has been basically begging other producers to produce more because we are producing less. Okay, when
Why are
they're
we producing less?
because of, in my opinion, again, green policies. We want less fossil fuels being burnt. We want less production to be had. And that drives the cost up because there's less of a supply. Okay. The demand is only going up.
Although I guess, but that sort of flies in the face of what happened with the whole fracking explosion. I was in West Texas whenever that whole boom was happening, and I mean, like there are so many other external factors that it's not just because it's not as simple as supply and demand. I mean, like look at the '70s with OPEC. I mean, like they were just like, we're not going to give you guys any more oil. And then you had people lining up at the gas stations, prices shoot. Is it because there wasn't any? No, there was plenty. I mean, it's just these actors that can very easily influence and manipulate market prices. And I think that tying it to something like green energy policies is a little simplistic of a view on the whole thing.
Dude,
And,
but here's the thing, dude, you mentioned it perfectly. Here's the thing. That's just like when it comes to importing anything, whether it's medicine from China, you're reliant on it. So during, again, just within our lifetime years ago, the United States was actually exporting oil and gas. Okay. That was actually a law that had to be changed. But under the Trump administration, we were actually exporting gas because we had a surplus. The only way you are beholden to imports, which a cartel of oil producers can, at their whim, and say, you know what, we're not going to give it to you now. And then you're screwed. But then if you're like, you know what, we don't even need your, because you're right, this is a global commodity and we're producing so much that we're actually exporting it at the global rate. That is that's actually national security at that point.
and then what happens? What do you think? We just like it just Joe Biden came in and said, stop producing. You know what happened? We flooded the market. Like there was just that was brought the prices crashing down. It was because like drill baby drill, and all of a sudden like, oh shit, we don't have enough people to buy this stuff. And I mean, we saw that. And I mean, this is a typical boom and bust, sort of history we see with the oil industry. And it's just real easy to pin it on, depending on the party that's in power, right? But I mean, like we see it all the time.
Well, I'm not pinning
especially
it.
In Corpus, like you see the big trucks, right? Like whenever people got jobs, and then all of a sudden, the prices tank, people start getting laid off. I mean, it's just, I mean, I think I would be an idiot to try to act like I know, exactly what it is that's causing this. I'm not calling you an idiot.
No, but the thing is, there is.
I'm not calling you an idiot.
But would you say?
But I mean, I think it's just such a complex issue that a lot more people know a lot more about than I do.
Well, that is a take on it. What I would say is you can say this, and I'm not putting it on a party. What I would say, look at Joe Manchin. He's ostracized in his own party because he doesn't want to go this route because he's in an energy producing state. And so the whole deal is that I'm talking about policies, and they were policy changes on day one, executive orders on day one that were specifically oriented towards energy production. Okay. And so we look at cause and effect. And you're right, there are all kinds of other external factors, but you cannot deny that there were changes in policy, and now prices are up. And in the world of politics, it doesn't matter. You can't say, well, oh, well, this is like, no. You know what? Biden in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and multiple swing states is like way underwater, like low 40s, dude, low 40s.
Yeah, he's got. I mean, across the board, the guy. I think he's at like at the point in his presidency, like a fucking excuse me, an even lower approval rating than Donald Trump had at that point in his presidency. He's not a popular guy. I mean, voted for him. It's like one of those things. Like, really, it's one of those like I just can't sit here and defend, the choice, right? But I tell you what, though, given the chance, knowing what I know now, I probably would still vote for him again, just because it's like, oof, I can't, justify like this was a great choice. But I also think that the other guy was a fucking disaster. Excuse
No,
me, a
you didn't vote.
disaster.
You didn't vote for Biden. You voted for a Democrat president. Most people, and I think a lot of people also voted for non-Donald Trump. That was a big deal. People didn't
We had
vote.
4 years of it.
People didn't vote for Biden. They voted because there's like, I've had enough of this Trump guy. It's too much,
Yeah.
right? So okay, that's great. The point is that when you give, you have to remember this. Is why I think I've expressed to you in our super secret society meetings on how I really am more into the party platform than to the individual politician, because people like to say, oh, well, I vote for the person. No, that's terrible, because if you look at their record, they will end up voting like 98% of the time with their party. Okay. So it's not, you're not voting for the person. They're just they're rank and file, and they're gonna go
Mhm.
along almost 98% of the time with their party. So it's better for the informed
Mhm.
voter to be familiar with the party platform and what they stand for, because the individual candidate is going to most likely vote for those things when bills and things come up. So you shouldn't even, the person, and I can be wrong. I'm sure somebody will have an eloquent rebuttal to that. Not you, somebody else, but 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 that's why I say that I don't even vote for the person. I vote for some principles in politics.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's why I say, given the chance to do it, I'd do it. Probably, I'm going to vote exactly the same way, right? Just because, I don't know that I could disagree with that point. It's the platform, right? We all kind of had a feeling he was going to suck, but I guess we just kept telling ourselves like it can't be as bad, as Trump. And I mean, he's giving him a run for his money, but
Yeah.
it's just, I mean, I also was just very turned off by the whole combativeness of like everything is like you know, everything's like a fist fight, and it's never a clean fight. It's a real dirty fight, right? Like nothing substantive. It was always just like catchy one liner type, always low energy. Like,
Oh,
come
the
on, dude, you
Trump
weigh
thing,
like 270
but
pounds,
yeah, that's the whole that. But that was the whole. That was the charming. That what some
It was a
people find.
strongman thing,
What some people find charming. You got to give it to him. I mean, half of the people, half of the people love him. It's pretty much
Uh-huh.
what you is pretty much where it goes. It's about almost 50-50, or not even love. Love is a strong word, but like 30% of people love him, and then there's probably another 10% who don't love him, but they still voted for him because they vote for a party, just like how you voted for Biden. Okay, and that's where I get upset. Is like
Yeah.
I don't judge people some people get real ugly about it, like, oh, you voted for Biden. He's freaking. I bet you Jill has to wipe his ass because he's fucking 80 years old. Okay, but you didn't vote for. I know nobody voted for Biden. Okay, they voted for a Democrat president. Okay, and that's the opposite. I do the thing that which is boss about Trump is that people voted for him, not the Republican Party. There's millions of votes, I think, out of the 70 something million that he got, who are voting for him. And what's bad for the GOP is that they're not going to go vote for the next GOP candidate. Same thing that was the Obama effect that the Democrats lost out on, is that there were millions of Obama voters who necessarily aren't going to go vote for the next Democrat president candidate.
It's one of those things, and I mean, I guess I can kind of glean from that you sort of view that as a positive, but there's a name for that. It's called the cult of personality, and we see that sort of thing in countries that don't necessarily have open and free elections, right? That was when people talk about, like, oh, he's Hitler, right? Like, Trump is Hitler, and that's always going to get pushback because of like what comes with that. But to a degree, like a lot of Trump, he styled himself in the way of like these strongman dictator types. It just, it didn't pan out exactly the way I guess he would have hoped for. But I mean, you see a lot of the same sort of, it's the party became, he is the party, right? Like, and that's what we're seeing now, rank and file. I'm sure there's plenty of folks behind closed doors that, this guy's an idiot. I wish he'd go away. But they're going to go on stage and be like, he is going to save the country and we need to get behind him. I mean, it's just one of those, like, it was a very weird thing, right? And you touched on something with, post-Obama Democratic Party, right? Like, they lost some steam. And to their credit, or, maybe it was a massive tactical mistake. There's something, I guess, that I personally respect about, like, he faded away into the ether when he could have easily, been at the forefront the entire Trump administration. He came out towards the end like, son of a bitch, I need to throw my weight around here. Sure. But I think that he followed this sort of historical precedent of the outgoing president sort of stepping aside and not, dominating the news cycle, which is, again, another norm that Donald Trump has shattered. And I think that kind of plays into this I don't think there's a better way to put it. The cult of personality around him, right?
Certainly, I think one of the factors in that, I think, is that, yeah, you're right. Trump is the opposite of whatever the norm is for these things. Second, he has the
for better or worse. I mean,
yes, if for better or again, I'm not either way as an observation, right? And then the other observation, he's in the unique situation to run again. When Bush finished, you can fade away. When Obama finished, you can fade away. Trump lost, so there's always going to be this angle. There's always going to be this push for commentators, and really got to look at this too. Just like the Joe Rogan, this controversy. Everybody hoards if Joe Rogan had $1 for every time some mainstream or anybody else put said his name, he'd have another $10 million right now. Okay. Because they use it for clout.
I mean, to a degree, that's what's happening right now.
No, that's the same thing with Trump. So the thing is, too, Trump is highlighted in everything, too, whether he wants to or not. So it's half his
fault. Oh, he wants it.
No, of course, he plays with it, but he has it takes two to tango. All these people, CNN, MSNBC, they're only parroting it all. They don't have to put it on, but it's all about ratings. Okay, they know Trump sells. And so he could have very easily been, kind of more, quieted better, but that's not the case for multiple reasons. One, because he's still a political candidate. Second, he sells. And
third, he's got all kinds of stuff going on in the background. Yeah, these investigations and
no.
Suits
Trump is going to go down for doing what every developer and every homeowner tries to do, which is minimize the value of his property so that he can pay less taxes. that's where he's gonna get
Although
indicted
you
or
stop
in
short of
trouble.
breaking the law. That's the sort of,
No, well, that's breaking the law. What I'm
if he
saying is
if he did in fact break the
everybody
law.
does no what no, that's where they're gonna try to get him. That's where they're gonna he for years through mechanisms was undervaluing his property. But then when he was seeking loans, he was saying it's actually worth this. And then so they're gonna try to say he was
Which is
lying on these
probably
loan,
illegal.
which he's saying he's trying to lie on these loan documents. I don't know. It's a stretch because you can say, hey, if I fight as a homeowner and say, hey, my house is only worth $170,000, and then some taxing authority is fool enough to say, okay, I didn't break any law unless I'm sending them falsified documents that say I haven't done X, Y, and Z. But if
And
I
that's
just,
it.
well, that's what we're going to find out. I don't think there's no evidence of this. The only accusation is that he was devaluing his properties. Then, like every homeowner does, when you try to sell it, you try to say, hey, it's worth whatever the market is willing to pay, right? And so that's where
And
he's
that's a
been
little, and
trying.
see, and that's, I think, where we're kind of we're jumping the gun a little bit there, because he's not doing this. He's not like undervaluing for tax purposes and then trying to flip that property. He's inflating his entire net worth, or his entire, how much, like basically he's using these overvaluations to secure
It's
loans
not. It's not an
from banks
over.
to make.
It's not
That's what the
necessarily.
accusation is. The
No, it's not.
accusation is that,
It's
like you're
not.
saying, right? He whenever it comes to pay his tax, we're like, whoa, I'm operating at a huge loss. We're not making any money. But then he wants to buy a new hotel. And he's like, look at all this super valuable stuff that I have. And I don't. And I mean, it's one of those things that there could be a million reasons why. But when your accountant suddenly decides, like, ooh, you know what? We're not saying we did anything wrong here. We saw anything wrong, but we're going to step away. Then they did something really interesting, mentioning a non-waivable conflict of interest as as the main reason why they were cutting ties with him. That's got some, like, when you work in the legal world, that's got some, like, that rings a little bell in your head, like, oh,
I'm concerned about.
they're
I feel
worried
like
about criminal
no,
liability,
I know. I feel well.
because
They
that's where
should.
those non-waivable conflicts come up.
Well, listen. If I'm working with the world renowned and lawyers and accountants,
For
and
sure.
they're breaking the law for me, they have a fiduciary duty to say I can't do that.
So it was Mazars. So it was Mazars, or however you pronounce it. So they're the ones. I mean, like, the thing is, like, when at those levels of, like, we're not talking about you and me and, like, our home. Like, we're talking about, I mean, the way that he's described himself, and this before he was president, folks,
No,
because he loves being covered by, journalists and stuff. But he's very involved at, like, at all levels of, like, they basically, like, nothing happens without Trump knowing about it. But he's also been he doesn't use email, right? He has layers and layers of insulation. What he has is he allows for folks like yourself, very, very, very good folks, are good at observing, plausible deniability. It's like the fucking mob, man. Like,
no.
it's like,
Well, the thing about Trump, and I think a lot of what makes him charming is that I feel like most people in that situation would be like, that's exactly what I would have done. This is what people do. And if it wasn't for Trump, the thing is, what Trump did, probably hundreds of other builders in New York have done, and they're not being indicted for it. The only reason Trump is because he's in politics and he has
he may not even get
enemies.
indicted.
And he
I
has
don't think,
enemies.
we'll
No,
see.
I think it's just too. I don't think they will indict him just because of the political ramifications. It's like Hillary Clinton deserves to go to jail. They'll never indict her because of the political ramifications. It's not worth it. But he's not doing what others haven't done. And again, I still think it's a stretch. If I can say, again, unless you can prove that
That's what they're working on.
he's providing false documents to make it seem like the property is worth less. But he just says to the taxing authority, this building is worth $5 million. But then he goes to this bank and says, I actually think this bank is worth, or this bill is worth $15 million, and this is why. No one's putting. I mean, unless you can show falsified documents, this is how property really does work. I see this every day. I see properties on the Nueces County appraisal district that show $150,000, and yet they're selling for $230,000.
Yeah, I mean
Because
the average American challenges their property valuation when the CAD sent them the hey, your
yeah,
house is worth X amount. You know,
because the value, because that's the other thing about this too, is which makes it subjective, is that the value of property is not necessarily what the taxing authority says it's worth. The value of property on a bank, to a bank, is because this is a profit motive, is exactly the property is only worth as much as someone is what the market is willing to bear, what someone is willing to pay for it. Okay. And so
Mhm.
this is how in which I don't think, again, unless you're just lying through your teeth, which Trump has done multiple mini real estate deals. This is not like he's just pulling this completely defrauding banks who don't know who is this guy. They know who they're doing business with. So
which is why he started losing. I mean, like, which is why he did business with Deutsche Bank. There was a lot of domestic. I mean, like what you're describing is what he literally did: burned himself with bank
you
after
do
bank
that
after bank.
happens. That happens. That happens. That
It
happens.
definitely does. But I mean, like I mean, like it's one thing to say like Wells Fargo called me, they were shutting my account down, versus like at the scale and at the clip at this guy was doing it. And we don't really know. I mean, like the thing is, what we're speculating, right? Like the contents of these investigations, like what they're. I mean, you know that they're trying to get reams and reams of documents. Who knows what they're looking through right now? What I do know is that at least like, and these are like state prosecutorial authorities, right? Like it's not like in the feds, they're not going to indict unless like they got you. They've got like some ridiculous like conviction rate when they come after you. I mean, that's why the ones that beat the feds are so noteworthy, right? Because it doesn't happen, very frequently. And I think that, I mean, obviously the Manhattan DA's office, very high profile office. They probably operate a little more closely to, like, if you're going to say, is it like the county attorney's office in Travis County? That's probably closer to the way the feds operate in terms of how sophisticated their operation is. And I think that's why, I mean, aside from the political ramifications, I think that's also part of why we haven't heard anything, in terms like any rumblings when it comes to like, is there an indictment coming from the criminal investigation? That's going parallel with the civil investigation that the attorney general from New York is doing. We're not going to hear much of anything for long periods, and there's like activity, right? I mean, sort of the similar thing with like Matt Gaetz, although he is dealing with the feds, and it's one of those that it should shock nobody that it's taking the time that it's taking for like any sorts of.
You said Matt Gaetz, like the
Yeah,
associate of
the guy from Florida. He's a congressman from Florida. He's got that investigation going about sex trafficking.
Yeah, that's all.
He was in the news for like, and then disappeared. And
this is where again, and all of this, when it came to the Mueller report, when it comes to this Gates thing, and I can be proven wrong, and I would love to be, but in my experience, and I'm only 38 years old, and I've only been paying attention to politics for like, I mean, maybe since I was in my early 20s, kind of, right? When the goods when the goods are there, the goods are there. The Matt that Matt Gaetz, yeah, there's smoke, but there's not. He's not. All of a sudden, we're gonna find out that he was part of some prostitution ring, or he slept with like 10 minor girls.
I don't think it was anything like that. But
no, they don't have anything, because if that was the case, no, this all looks bad. This is all an or. But you know what looks bad? Bill Clinton was on Epstein's plane 26 times. Okay.
Well, see, and that's where you kind of that's a red herring. I mean, like, we're talking about there's individuals who are like have been charged with these crimes, and when you think about guys like Matt Gaetz,
which crime?
His buddy, the guy who worked as like a tax.
Yeah, but that's guilt by association.
It was the thing,
Bill
though.
Clinton was actually on the plane.
But this is why I call it red herring, because what you're basically saying is, what about her emails, rather than addressing the sort of the nuance that's going on with Matt Gaetz.
Okay,
so it's more than him, right? So you gotta.
I do think it's unpleasant. I do feel like he was a single man, and his buddy was this also involved in politics. I think he was some
like state office.
Yeah, he was in a state office,
like tax office or something.
And that's how what is being alleged is that this guy was creating fake IDs for underage girls because they're in the youth of there's all kinds of youth GOP organizations and things like that, and these guys were attending a lot of these university um, things, and even I guess even high school where they were underage girls. So they're meeting all these girls, they're young single men themselves, and the allegation is that the the Gates was how they got busted was that they were creating these. He had authority. He was creating these IDs or something.
They were going
And
through like discarded, like when you go and you renew your ID and they cut your thing and they you want to keep it,
yes,
or they were
yes,
going
yes.
through like
So
there was
this,
like video, or like it was
I
just
have, yes, I have no doubt that Gates for sure was trying to hook up with chicks. I mean, whether they're
I
underage or not, 16,
I think it was
17
one of
years
those where
old.
he just kind of like, when you catch yourself, like you not necessarily having to do with that particular topic, but when you come to a point where you have to make a decision about something. Let's just make it about, I don't know, something completely unrelated to women, right? But you kind of know, like, probably shouldn't do this, but it's probably going to be super cool, and that sort of like, I feel like you probably did not go into this with the intention of sleeping with an underage girl. But I
Mhm.
mean, it's just like saying she had a fake IDs in the defense. Like in the state of Texas, if you sleep with an underage girl and she had a fake ID that said she was 21, but she's 14, they're gonna lock your ass up because that's just the way it works, right? So I mean, and
True.
I think you kind of started touching on something that a lot of people are putting targets on their back,
Well, what
and
is she
they're engaging
17?
in.
What is she
Well, I mean, it
7?
depends on the
Uh,
local laws, right? Like, I mean,
yeah.
like what they're, how it works. I'm not a Florida
No.
attorney, so I don't know anything about what they do over there. But I do know that, I mean, and this is just a very general comparison. I'm not like saying that he's Al Capone, but what did Al Capone go down for? He went down for taxes, right?
True.
Not all the bodies they tried to pin on him, right? And so when you're a guy like Matt Gaetz, who's rabble rousing, right? He wants to be front and center. You put a target on your back. I mean, probably, like, I mean, very probably touching on what you were talking about, Donald Trump being kind of put through the ringer for stuff that countless other developers in that, playing that same sandbox went,
This goes both
un.
this goes both ways because so you're absolutely right. They have to, if you want to get into politics, you better be fucking Mitt Romney, okay? Because yeah, you're going down, man. You're gonna go down. I'm sure Matt Gates was trying to hook up with young women. Okay, that was his goal. His mindset is I'm gonna sleep with young chicks, and his this buddy was sending them to him. He's always gonna have, like you mentioned, plausible deniability. So unless they can prove that this girl was presented herself as underage, it's hard to prove unless they're 10 years old or prepubescent and tying, that you didn't know or that you knew. That's why when you see these child pornography, it's always with young children because it's just very difficult to, I guess, probably get a conviction to say this person should have known unless you have the underlying evidence that they knew. Okay, but if somebody just shows up and they're 16, they look and they're develop, all those things. So I think that's where this is going. So I'm not saying I can't vouch for the guy that there isn't going to be evidence later that says that he didn't know. Okay, but I believe you hit the nail on the head when it comes that the only reason he's even in the spotlight about this is because of the target on his back. But it does go both ways. And I'm bring this one mention like the district attorney in Baltimore. She's under federal indictment. Her and her husband. Her and her husband. I forget what the lady's name is, but she's got this little gap. She's a black lady. She's attractive. She during COVID, because of COVID, there was these rule changes within the state or the District of Columbia, because I think she's in DC, that allowed for federal workers, because of certain types of hardships, to pull money that would normally be ineligible without penalty from their
Their pensions or
Their
something.
pensions, exactly, exactly. What is being alleged is that when this woman did this, but then she used that money as added income, okay, to her adjusted income, right? So she pulled like 200 grand. So now all of a sudden she goes from her salary of 235 to like 400 and something. And she used that income on mortgage applications for several homes in Florida. Okay.
She's
So
probably
she,
going down.
no, she is. She is. She's screwed. I mean, no, no doubt, no doubt. She, like you're saying, that is fraud. That is
Hmm.
no, that's knowingly fraud. She's gonna play ignorant and say, "I didn't know I couldn't do that." Obviously, but you can't pull money from your pension and say all of a sudden my income is way much higher. She shouldn't. She's an educated person. She, she knew what she was doing. Okay, she knew what she was doing as well, and so she's. And the thing is that probably there's probably some other random federal employee who did the same thing, but they're not
We're gonna just slide right under the radar.
slide right under the radar, no doubt, because they're not a political they're not a politician who has enemies. And so I think this is one of the main things that we have to wrestle with when they talk about when AOC goes and talks about how our democracy, oh, they're right. It's it's not right wing militias, it's not Antifa. What threatens the democracy is this kind of stuff. The corruption within political, people in politics who are corrupt, who are not ethical people,
Yeah,
and
no, I don't disagree with that at all.
that goes beyond in all political persuasions.
Yeah, I mean,
You
like
know,
you could. I mean, I wonder what. I'm curious where. I mean, I think any sort of like breaking it down into percentages would be meaningless, just because I think if you wait long enough, you could see the numbers tip. Either way. But I mean, like people are people, man. Like I don't care what your personal convictions are, and I hate to kind of put it this way, but every man has his price, I guess. Whether
yes,
we're talking about money or other things, right?
yes, yes,
And I think that humans are we're corruptible, right? Like and I think that when you're operating at those levels, how do you not? Like, I don't, like, I criticize Kanye West a lot because I think he's an egomaniac, but, I was watching this documentary, the first part of that documentary today,
yeah. I haven't seen
and
it, but I will. Yeah. What about
so
it?
I won't spoil anything, but what I
Yeah.
will say is that I watched it with the intention of like disliking him more,
Sure.
right? But that's not what happened. I've watched about the first half hour of it, and I came away from that thinking like, damn, he wasn't that guy back then. I mean, you could see sort of like the beginnings of it, but he was just super talented and super self aware, actually, which is like that's not a word that people use to describe Kanye West these days.
Sure. No, he's a
But
diva
I think
now.
he's a
He
good
turned it.
example.
He's a male diva in that way, and he feels, and I do feel like it's a part of it. It really is a big like a
I mean, when you
character that
when
he's playing now. Like he's playing
and
a
everybody around you tells you how great you are, right? And like everything you do, you find success, right? Like at some point you start maybe I am, the guy. Maybe I am the genius of this shit. Maybe the Picasso
yeah.
of the rap industry in my generation. And maybe he is, but when you start saying it out loud, that's when people start saying, ugh,
Well,
I've always
he's
been the
trying
type
to.
that says other people should say that thing about sort of thing about you versus like,
Maybe he's
you
trying to.
singing your own praise.
He's trying to go the. Maybe he's trying to go the Muhammad Ali route and stuff, like where you
I mean,
proclaim
he's
all this.
arguably achieved it, right? I mean,
No, he
like as
is.
much as I don't like him, he's among the most, if not the most influential, hip hop artist of this particular,
No,
era, I guess.
I think he would fit the description of pop icon. He's a pop icon. He's an international pop star. He's an icon. People know him. That's what he's got going for him. And the cool thing is he's been able to kind of not reinvent himself. I don't like the whole
I mean,
monochromatic.
arguably, yeah.
He has, but
But
like I don't dig his ultimate. I mean, it's fashion is like art. eye of the beholder kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
his whole what he's putting out is just not my cup of tea. No, for sure. Like the
Apparently, a
moral.
lot of other people cup of
No,
tea.
no, no, but it is. It is. It's $1 billion business. So good for him. I liked Kanye in the early 2000s. I think he was, and I'm gonna watch the documentary because I do feel he's super talented on the production side and on the rapper side. But I think on the production, like these revivals, these Christian revivals that he puts on, I've heard are amazing production.
That
And so
Sunday service thing that he does.
those
I didn't
Sunday
even know what it
services,
was.
the Sunday service thing that he's done, there are different levels to it. So certain areas are bigger than other. But from what I've seen on YouTube, it's a big production and it's amazing. I'm sure the people who are there are probably uplifted, right? And so he has that going for him. I think we're gonna segue to one last thing before we go, because I want to have some time to edit this, my friend Martin Pena. Don't forget we're on episode 107 of Jamin's Daily. Our guest, Martin Pena, is a lawyer in San Antonio, but he's also my
Austin.
opponent. Oh, you're in Austin. I'm sorry. Austin. Let me stand corrected.
It's a liberal heartland, baby. Austin, Texas.
No, no, no. And you seem like we have a differences on certain things, but they're not. I don't think we're on the the far ends of either of these
I
political
think we like
persuasions
messing
we
with
talk
each
about.
other
We
a whole
do,
lot.
we do. But it's easy when you're just texting somebody. It's harder when
Yeah.
we get to look at each other's faces. But just to